I'm Jessica Ganawa, a lecturer in international relations at Flinders University in Australia, and I'm talking today with Maxim Yali, head of a Centre for a New World Order and Professor of International Relations at the National Aviation University in Kyiv. Thanks for joining me today, Maxim.
Welcome, Jessica.
So I wanted to just get your quick response. We had a sort of interesting, I guess, talk from Putin in recent days, President Putin of Russia, where he talked about Peter the Great, seemed to be in some ways making an analogy possibly between himself and Peter the Great, but also talking about Russia's historical claims to territories that are now currently in Eastern Europe and in other European countries. He mentioned specifically Estonia. He talked about Sweden. So do you think that this is just Putin, giving a talk for his domestic populations, or do you think that he does actually have some kind of expansionist aims that realistically go beyond Ukraine?
Well, what is, first of all, I would like to mention that context is important. He was saying it, and he said it to children, to pupils, young children who study fake history. I know because I used to work at the Institute of World History, National Academy of Sciences, and I even went to Moscow. Well, I don't remember, 6-7 years ago, and they were giving, during Yanukovych was a president, they were trying to make even common textbook for history. And they are faking it if you just compare textbooks of history at school in Soviet Union, then after it collapsed in 10 years, during Yeltsin time, and then during Putin first few president periods, and now you will realize that such a phrase like history is not a science, it is a tool, and is written by the winners, is true. And I know it pretty well because first 5 years I studied in the Soviet Union, and books as well, and textbooks. Then after USSR collapsed, we started studying finally Ukrainian history, and we realized how it differed. And also, so it's the first thing I would like to dwell upon, like context. Yes, he was sending messages, of course, first of all to domestic audience, but of course as well to outside world, because he doesn't care much about domestic audience, especially about children who have no right even to vote, whose votes mean nothing, taking into account how elections take place in Russia. He also doesn't care about domestic audience as a whole, because propaganda is very strong. We discussed with you, and 80% of Russians support him. But it also concerns mentality and identity. And why he told it, I would like to explain you a few things. Firstly, what it means, as I wrote, it is rebranding of Putin. Firstly, he declared that it would take few days. It's a special military operation, which was supposed to be over in a few weeks. and the whole territory of Ukraine to be occupied. Why in that statement, of course, I watched it, he said, why he made such parallels? Because the war, it is already clear, and we discussed with you, getting longer and longer, and there is no end to it. And why he made such parallels? Because, as he mentioned, Peter the First, who was actually the constructor of Russian Empire, with the help of Ukrainians, by the way, who wrote and who were the architects of Russian Empire, the, like, I would say, okay, what, as I told, and he said that Russia was waging war with Sweden, who was paramount, I would say, #1 power at that time in Europe. Nobody knew about US, etc. at that times. He told that it was longing just for 21 years. So he just like make grounds that this war will keep going on for a long time. And second part, which you mentioned, that it concerns, as I have already told you before, that he will not stop on Ukraine. And from one point of view, he sends a signal to Western partners, hey guys, just give me Ukraine as much as I want if you don't want me to go further. It's #1. And the second one, Estonia, he mentioned, yes? Well, Sweden. Sweden, as you know, having realized who Putin really is, now she wants to join NATO. Yes? So, and of course it's a threat because, as Putin says, he decided to wage war against Ukraine because we are willing to join NATO. No matter that a year ago he was telling by himself after he met with President Biden that they haven't even discussed it, the perspectives of joining Ukraine to NATO, because it's a question of a long time. And of course, Estonia, why Estonia, for example, Baltic states, Poland, support us most of all? Because they realize that they're gonna be next. They realize that the threat is really strong and that Putin will not stop on Ukraine if he wins here. So, in brief, I would say, like, these are the main points.
Yeah, thanks.
If you have some additional questions, you are welcome.
No, thanks, Maxim. I mean, I'm interested in how you mentioned that Putin is undertaking a kind of a rebranding strategy regarding what Russia is doing in Ukraine. And it makes me wonder to what extent that will be successful in the Russian domestic context, because go ahead.
Yeah, finish and I will
well, in some ways, the trajectory of the conflict depends upon Putin being able to sell to his own domestic populations that this is a smooth sort of rebranding of the objectives of Russia in Ukraine. And if he can't do that, then maybe some cracks might start to appear in that story or that narrative about what Russia has really been trying to do.
You know, two more things very important. As I mentioned, it is #1, rebranding of Putin. And #2, it's also very understandable explanation to Russian audience why they are waging war against Ukraine. Because denazification, demilitarization, they don't realize and understand what it means. So, I mean, the goals he proclaimed, yes, on the 24th of February. But to rob, to rape, to get new territories, it's understandable for a common Russian very well, for those who are going to this war. And it is like, you know, it's in Russian identity and the principle of empire, Russian empire particularly, it's just expansion. That's how they can exist. If they stop expansionism, these troubles, internal problems will blow up Russia. So it's a way to export chaos, you know. And his advisor, who was responsible for Ukraine, for Donetsk and Lugansk republics, who was dismissed a few years ago, he wrote an article about it in November, if I'm not mistaken, where he said already that he just explained it, that without expansion, Russian cannot exist, and that they will occupy new territories and there will be war, and that Ukraine will be split. He wrote it everything, like giving some even methodology, theory of chaos, you know, etc. It was an interesting article. It's one thing, and one more to finish it. I would like to cite him. I remember a few years ago, he was also in some school, and the schoolboy asked him a question. They were studying about the map, and he asked Putin, where the borders of Russia finish? And Putin answered him, borders of Russia finish nowhere. So this trajectory was already, it explains everything. So until he stopped, until he will not finish until he stopped only on the battlefield.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Thanks, Maxim. Appreciate your comments today.
You're welcome.